My daughter-in-law called me a pathetic security guard at her wedding. I'm Sam Brooks. What Victoria didn't know was simple. For 30 years, I'd been preventing terrorist attacks for the CIA. 3 hours later, Secret Service agents walked into her $500,000 Martha's Vineyard reception. They carried a presidential letter and orders to escort me for immediate consultation. Every guest watched, including federal contractors whose contracts her family just lost forever. Victoria thought she was humiliating nobody. She destroyed everything instead. 2 years of treating me like hired help. 2 years of jokes about my $12 paycheck. 2 years of telling people I embarrassed her family name. She never asked the right questions. That wedding day, Victoria decided to go public with her feelings. Fatal mistake. The presidential letter revealed my Medal of Honor. The Treasury authorized my $2.3 million back pay. Agent Harrison confirmed my classified service record over speakerphone. Victoria's world collapsed in real time. Here's what really happened when a gold digger discovered she'd been attacking a war hero. You've probably dealt with people who judge your worth by your wallet. People who think expensive clothes make them superior. This story's for you. If you're watching this, please subscribe. You're going to want to see how this ends. Let me show you how 30 years of classified service came out of the shadows. The disrespect didn't start at the wedding. It began 2 years ago when Victoria Hayes married my son Danny. I was proud of Danny. Software engineer, good head on his shoulders, making $95,000 a year in Boston. But Victoria came from old Martha's Vineyard money. Her family owned Hayes Real Estate, managing properties worth over $50 million across Cape Cod. The first time she saw me in my Allied Barton security uniform, her face changed. "This is what you do?" she asked, looking at my 12 an hour name tag. "Building security at one financial center," I said. "Someone has to keep the lights on." She turned to Danny. "Your father is a security guard?" The way she said it stung, like I was invisible. Like 30 years of service meant nothing because she couldn't see the whole picture. My wife Maggie tried to explain. "Sam has had many careers, Victoria. This is just his current chapter." But Victoria had already made up her mind. At family dinners, she'd introduce me to her friends differently. "This is Danny's father. He works security." Always that pause. Always that look. The second incident happened at Danny's promotion party last Christmas. Victoria's brother showed up in his new BMW. "Real estate's booming," he bragged. "Just closed a $3.2 million waterfront deal." Victoria nodded. "Unlike some people, we believe in building wealth, not just watching buildings." She looked directly at me when she said it. I kept eating my dinner. "Someone has to do the watching," I said quietly. But inside, something was building. You can only take so much before you start wondering if staying silent is really protecting anyone. The third incident was the breaking point. Victoria was planning the wedding, showing off her $85,000 Hermes dress to her mother and sisters. "We're spending $500,000 on this wedding," she announced. "Danny's family better not embarrass us." Her mother asked about the guest list. "Danny's father works security," Victoria said, like she was apologizing. "Hopefully he'll dress appropriately. Maybe we can seat him in the back." That's when Maggie finally spoke up. "Sam Brooks has served this country longer than you've been alive, Victoria." "Served how?" Victoria laughed. "By checking IDs at office buildings?" Maggie looked at me. I shook my head slightly. "Not yet." "You'll understand someday," Maggie said. But Victoria just rolled her eyes. "I understand perfectly. Some people dream big. Others settle for small." I lived in a modest $1,400 a month apartment in Cambridge, drove a 2019 Honda Civic with 78,000 miles, shopped at Stop and Shop with coupons. By every measure Victoria cared about, I was exactly what she thought. A failure. What she didn't know was that I chose this life. After 3 decades of classified operations, midnight flights to countries that don't officially exist, and threats that would give most people nightmares, I wanted normal. I wanted to sit in a quiet lobby, check badges, and go home to Maggie without wondering if someone had followed me. But normal comes with a price. People judge what they can see. They don't ask questions about encrypted phones that ring at 3 a.m. They don't notice when you instinctively check exit routes in every room. They definitely don't recognize the significance of mail addressed from Washington, D.C. Victoria saw a 61-year-old man in a security uniform making $12 an hour. She had no idea she was looking at someone who'd received 3 Purple Hearts and prevented attacks that would have made 9/11 look like a warm-up. But that was about to change. Because on July 4th weekend, 2024, at the most expensive wedding Martha's Vineyard had seen all summer, my classified past and Victoria's public arrogance were about to collide, and 180 of New England's most powerful people were going to witness every second of it. The stakes weren't just about hurt feelings. This was tearing my family apart. Danny was caught in the middle, trying to keep peace between his wife and his father. I watched him lose weight, work longer hours, anything to avoid coming home to the tension. Dad, maybe you could, I don't know, explain your background to Victoria? He asked me one evening. Son, some things are classified for good reasons. But she thinks you're... He stopped himself. A loser? Danny's silence was answer enough. The financial pressure was real too. Victoria wanted a wedding that would impress her Martha's Vineyard circle. $500,000 wasn't just showing off. It was Victoria's way of proving the Hayes family hadn't made a mistake, letting their daughter marry a security guard's son. Danny was paying for 60% of it. His savings, gone. His stress level, through the roof. We could have a smaller wedding, he suggested to Victoria once. Absolutely not. My family has standards. We're not having some backyard barbecue because your father can't afford to contribute. The truth was, I could have written a check for the entire wedding without touching my real accounts. But those accounts were tied to my classified service record. Opening them meant opening questions I wasn't ready to answer. So I contributed what a $12 an hour security guard could afford, $2,400. Money that came from exactly where Victoria thought it came from. She made sure everyone knew. Sam gave us his little contribution, she told her mother during wedding planning. Every bit helps, I suppose. The real stakes went deeper than money. This was about identity, family, and what happens when someone you love chooses pride over truth. Maggie was furious. 30 years, Sam, 30 years you've kept quiet about everything. How long are you going to let her treat you like this? Until it threatens the family's stability. It's already threatening the family's stability. She was right. Danny had started avoiding family dinners. When he did show up, he looked exhausted, like he was fighting a war on 2 fronts. Victoria, meanwhile, was getting bolder. She started making comments in front of Danny's co-workers. Sam works security at some office building downtown. It's honest work. Always that pause. Always that tone that suggested honest work was the consolation prize for people who couldn't do better. But the real breaking point came 3 weeks before the wedding. Danny called me at 11 p.m. Dad, Victoria's threatening to uninvite you. What? She says you'll embarrass her family. She wants to seat you at a back table with the vendor staff. I felt something cold settle in my chest. What did you tell her? I told her absolutely not. You're my father. You'll sit at the family table or I'll call off the wedding. That's when I realized the stakes had changed. This wasn't about my pride anymore. This was about my son's marriage, his future, his happiness. Victoria was using my perceived failure as leverage to control Danny. If she could make him ashamed of his father, she could control how he saw himself, his worth, his place in her world. I had 2 choices. Keep playing the humble security guard and watch my son's marriage turn into a power struggle, where I was the weapon. Or reveal enough truth to level the playing field. But there was a third option I hadn't considered. What if Victoria revealed her true character so publicly, so dramatically, that the choice was made for me? What if I just waited? The wedding was scheduled for July 4th weekend at Martha's Vineyard Yacht Club. 180 guests, including federal contractors, politicians, and 3 people who owed their lives to operations I'd led. Victoria had spent months planning the perfect stage to showcase her family's superiority. She had no idea she was about to perform on a stage where some audience members knew exactly who I really was. "Danny," I said finally, "tell Victoria I'll be there. Front table, family seating, and I'll be bringing a guest." "Who?" "Your mother deserves to see this." Because Maggie had kept my secrets for 30 years. She'd watched me come home with injuries I couldn't explain, take calls I couldn't discuss, and disappear for weeks at a time on assignments that officially never happened. She'd earned the right to watch Victoria learn what happens when you mistake quiet service for weakness. The wedding was 3 weeks away. Victoria was about to get the public showcase she'd always wanted. She just didn't know what kind of show it was going to be. 3 days before the wedding, Victoria's mask finally slipped completely. We were at the rehearsal dinner at the Martha's Vineyard Yacht Club. 60 close family and friends, all seated around elegant tables overlooking the harbor. Victoria stood up to make a toast. "I want to thank everyone for being here," she began, holding her champagne glass. "This weekend represents everything our families value: success, tradition, and excellence." She looked at her parents' table where her father, Richard Hayes, nodded approvingly. He'd built Hayes Real Estate from 3 properties to a $50 million portfolio. Old Martha's Vineyard money, the kind that comes with social expectations. "Tomorrow, I'm marrying the most wonderful man," Victoria continued, looking at Danny. "Someone who shares my commitment to building something meaningful." Then her eyes found me. "We believe in surrounding ourselves with people who inspire us to reach higher. People who understand that success isn't an accident, it's a choice." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Victoria's mother, Patricia Hayes, leaned toward my wife. "What does Sam do again, Maggie?" "Security," Maggie said simply. "Oh," Patricia's tone shifted. "How dependable." But Victoria wasn't done. "Some people are content with simple lives," she said, still looking in my direction. "There's nothing wrong with that. Someone has to check the badges and watch the doors." A few guests laughed uncomfortably. Danny's face went red. "Victoria?" "What? I'm just saying everyone has their place. Some people dream big, others—" She shrugged. "Others do what they can." That's when I stood up. The room went quiet. Victoria looked surprised. She wasn't used to me responding publicly. "May I asked, gesturing toward my water glass. Victoria couldn't say no without looking petty. "Of course." I lifted my glass. To understanding that service comes in many forms. Some people serve openly. Others serve quietly. Both matter. I took a sip and sat down. Victoria's confidence faltered slightly, but she recovered. "Exactly. Everyone contributes what they can." But something had shifted. I'd drawn a line, and she'd felt it. After dinner, she cornered Danny in the hallway. "Your father embarrassed me. He made a toast. He made a point. In front of my family." I was standing close enough to hear every word. "Victoria, he's my father. He's a security guard, Danny. My family built this community. They employ hundreds of people. They don't need lectures about service from someone who checks IDs." "That's enough." "Is it? Because tomorrow, in front of everyone who matters on this island, your father is going to sit at our family table. What do you think that says about us?" Danny looked exhausted. "It says we're family. It says you're not serious about your future." I stepped around the corner. Both of them froze. "Problem?" I asked quietly. Victoria's face flushed. "We were just discussing seating arrangements." "I heard." For a moment, nobody spoke. Victoria was calculating, trying to figure out if I'd heard enough to cause real trouble. "Sam," she said finally, "I hope you understand this wedding is very important to my family." "I understand completely." "Good. Because tomorrow there will be some very influential people here. Federal contractors, politicians, business leaders. First impressions matter." "They do." Victoria studied my face, looking for anger, hurt, anything she could use, but I kept my expression neutral. "I'm sure you'll represent the family appropriately," she said. "I always do." But as she walked away, I heard her whisper to Danny, "We'll discuss this later." The next morning, July 4th, 2024, I put on my best suit. Navy blue, nothing flashy, the kind of outfit a security guard might wear to his son's wedding. Maggie watched me get dressed. You're really going to let her humiliate you in front of 180 people? I'm going to let her show everyone who she really is. And if Danny gets hurt in the crossfire? I looked at my wife of 32 years. Danny's about to learn something very important about the woman he married. Better now than after kids are involved. Maggie nodded slowly. The encrypted phone's been buzzing all morning. I know. Agent Harrison? Among others. Sam, are you sure about this? I finished adjusting my tie. Victoria wants to make a public statement about family values and social status. She's about to get her wish. In front of everyone? In front of everyone. Because sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to let them push so far, so publicly, that everyone can see exactly who they are. Victoria wanted to put me in my place. She was about to learn what my place actually was. The morning of the wedding, strange things started happening that Victoria couldn't ignore. First, there was the phone call. I was getting coffee in the hotel lobby when my encrypted BlackBerry rang. The one with the government seal on it. Brooks? Sam, it's Harrison. We need to talk. Agent Harrison White, my former CIA partner, now deputy director. Victoria was standing 10 feet away, close enough to hear my tone change. Not today, Harrison. Family wedding. That's exactly why we need to talk. Check your secure email. I hung up and turned around. Victoria was staring at the phone. Interesting ringtone, she said. Very official sounding. Work phone, I said simply. For building security? Everyone's got a work phone these days. But I could see her mind working. Security guards don't get calls that make them use first names with government officials. The second thing happened at the venue. We were setting up for photos when 3 men in dark suits approached me. Excuse me, are you Samuel Brooks? Victoria's ears perked up. One of the men had an earpiece. All 3 had that unmistakable federal agent posture. Depends who's asking. Agent Morrison, Treasury Department. We need to verify your identity for security clearance purposes. Victoria stepped closer. Security clearance? For what? Agent Morrison looked at her, then back at me. Sir, we just need confirmation of your current address for updated records. I rattled off my Cambridge apartment address. The agents nodded and walked away. Victoria grabbed my arm. Sam, what was that about? No idea. Maybe something at work. Treasury agents don't care about office building security guards. You'd be surprised what the government cares about these days. But her suspicion was growing. Over the next hour, she kept glancing at me, trying to piece together things that didn't fit her narrative. The third thing was the delivery. A hotel courier brought a sealed envelope to my room. Victoria was there when I signed for it. The letterhead read, Executive Office of the President, Washington, D.C. Victoria's eyes went wide. Presidential mail? Sam, what the hell is going on? Probably Veterans Affairs stuff. They share letterhead sometimes. That says Executive Office of the President. Government mail all looks official. I took the envelope and set it aside, but Victoria was practically vibrating with curiosity. Open it. It's private. Sam, if you're in some kind of trouble... I'm not in trouble. Then what is it? I looked at her for a long moment. Victoria, some things in life are more complicated than they appear. What's that supposed to mean? Before I could answer, Maggie walked in. Sam, we need to talk, she said, seeing the envelope. Privately. Victoria looked between us. This is ridiculous. It's my wedding day, and everyone's acting like there's some big secret. Maggie looked at the presidential letterhead. Some secrets are worth keeping. What secrets? He's a security guard. Is he? Maggie asked quietly. Victoria stared at her. What do you mean, is he? Maybe you should ask him about his Purple Hearts. His what? I shot Maggie a warning look, but she continued. Or his classified service record, or why he gets personal letters from Washington. Victoria's face went pale. I don't understand. You will, Maggie said. Very soon. Stop talking in riddles. What aren't you telling me? I stepped forward. Victoria, today is about you and Danny. Let's focus on that. No, I want to know what's going on. Why are federal agents asking about you? Why is the president sending you mail? What aren't you telling me? The room fell silent. Victoria was practically shaking with frustration and growing fear that she'd missed something crucial. You really want to know? I asked. Yes. I looked at Maggie, who nodded slightly. Then ask me again tonight, after the reception, in front of everyone. What? You want answers? Ask me in front of all your important guests. Ask me about my real background. Ask me about my service record. Ask me anything you want. Victoria's confidence wavered. What are you saying? I'm saying be careful what you wish for, because in 3 hours she was going to get her chance. The wedding ceremony went smoothly. Victoria looked stunning in her $85,000 Hermes dress, and Danny couldn't stop beaming. For 2 hours, everything was perfect. Then came the reception. Martha's Vineyard Yacht Club had been transformed into something from a magazine. White roses, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet. 180 of New England's most influential people filled the ballroom. I spotted familiar faces in the crowd. Congressman Bradley from the House Intelligence Committee, defense contractor Margaret Stone, whose company owed 3 successful bids to intelligence I'd provided in 2019, federal judge Patricia Coleman, who'd presided over trials involving cases I'd built. They all knew me by reputation, even if they'd never seen my face. Victoria didn't know any of this. The trouble started during cocktail hour. Victoria was introducing her parents to Danny's co-workers when she spotted me talking to a distinguished older man in a navy suit. "Excuse me," she said, approaching us. "I don't think we've met." The man nodded politely. "Robert Sterling, Federal Procurement. Sam and I go way back." Victoria's eyes lit up. Federal procurement meant government contracts, which meant money and influence. "How do you know Sam?" she asked. Sterling glanced at me. I gave him the slightest shake of my head. "We've worked together on security matters," he said carefully. "Oh, you're in building security too?" Sterling's eyebrows went up. "Building security?" "Sam works security at one financial center in Boston," Victoria explained, like she was helping clear up confusion. Sterling looked at me, then back at Victoria. "I see." After he walked away, Victoria grabbed my arm. "That man clearly knows you from something more than building security." "Maybe." "What do you mean, maybe? Sam, I'm tired of these games. What aren't you telling me?" "Nothing that matters today." But Victoria was getting agitated. The strange phone calls, the federal agents, the presidential mail, and now a federal procurement officer who obviously knew me from something bigger than checking badges. "It does matter," she said, her voice rising. "People are looking at you differently, like they know something I don't." "You're imagining things." "No, I'm not." "Margaret Stone nodded at you when she walked in. Congressman Bradley shook your hand like you were old friends. What is going on?" I stayed calm. "Victoria, today is your day. Don't let paranoia ruin it." "Paranoia?" Her voice was getting louder. "I'm not paranoid. I'm confused. My father-in-law, who I thought was a simple security guard, is apparently known by half the federal establishment on Martha's Vineyard." Danny appeared at her elbow. "Everything okay?" "No, everything is not okay," Victoria snapped. "Your father has been lying to us." "About what?" "About everything, about who he is, what he does, why federal agents are asking about him." Danny looked at me. I shrugged. "She's having a difficult day." "I am not having a difficult day," Victoria's voice cracked. "I'm having a breakdown because nothing makes sense anymore." That's when dinner was announced. We all took our seats at the head table. Victoria spent the entire meal shooting suspicious glances at me while I calmly ate my salmon. But she was boiling over. When the time came for toasts, Victoria's father went first. Traditional wedding speech about love, family, and bright futures. Danny spoke next, thanking everyone for coming and expressing his love for Victoria. Then Victoria stood up. "I want to thank everyone for being here," she began, her voice shaky with barely controlled emotion. "This has been a surprising day." The room sensed something was off. "I've learned a lot about family today, about honesty, about how well we really know the people closest to us." She looked directly at me. "For 2 years, I've known my father-in-law as a humble security guard. Someone who checks badges at an office building in Boston for $12 an hour. Murmurs around the room. This wasn't a typical wedding toast. But today I've discovered that federal agents know his name. Treasury Department officials verify his identity. The president sends him personal mail. Defense contractors treat him like an old friend. Danny reached for her arm. Victoria, sit down. No, she pulled away. These people deserve to know who they're celebrating with. Sam Brooks. Everyone. Security guard. Or whatever it is he really does. The room was dead silent. 180 pairs of eyes were on me. Victoria raised her champagne glass, her hand trembling, to honesty in family relationships, and to people who think they can lie about who they are for years, without consequences. And she was shaking with rage and confusion, the perfect storm of someone who'd built their identity around being superior to others, only to discover they might be completely wrong. So here's my question, Sam, she said, her voice echoing in the silent ballroom. What exactly do you do? Because it's clearly not building security. Are you FBI, CIA, some kind of federal agent? What have you been hiding from your own family? Every eye in the room was on me. Danny looked mortified. Maggie sat perfectly still, watching. I stood up slowly. Victoria, you really want to do this? Here? Now? In front of everyone? Yes, I want to do this. I want the truth. The truth about what? About who you really are. I looked around the room. Congressman Bradley was watching intently. Margaret Stone had her phone out, probably recording. Judge Coleman looked fascinated. You're sure? I'm sure. I nodded and reached into my jacket pocket. Okay, then. I pulled out the presidential letter that had been delivered that morning, still sealed. Let's see what the president has to say. The room fell completely silent as I held up the presidential letter. Victoria's face went white. What is that? You wanted the truth, I said, carefully opening the official seal. Let's find out together. I unfolded the letter and began reading aloud. Colonel Samuel Joseph Brooks, United States Army, retired. Central Intelligence Agency, Counterterrorism Division. Victoria grabbed the table for support. Danny's mouth fell open. I continued reading. By order of the President of the United States, you are hereby summoned for immediate consultation regarding Operation Sandstorm Declassification and National Security Briefing. The room erupted in whispers. Victoria was hyperventilating. The President of the United States, I read on, hereby acknowledges your 30 years of distinguished service, including prevention of 6 major terrorist attacks on American soil, and your receipt of 3 Purple Hearts, the Medal of Valor, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Victoria made a choking sound. Several guests started pulling out their phones. Furthermore, I continued, the Treasury Department is authorized to release $2.3 million in classified hazard pay, withheld pending declassification of your service record. I folded the letter and looked at Victoria. You asked who I really am. Colonel Brooks, CIA Counterterrorism Division, 30 years of service, 3 Purple Hearts. Medal of Honor recipient for Operation Sandstorm, November 2001. The applause started slowly, then built to a thunderous ovation. Victoria looked like she was going to faint. Congressman Bradley stood up. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in the presence of a true American hero. But I wasn't done. The letter also mentioned something else, I said, reaching into my other pocket. Agent Harrison White sends his regards. I pulled out my old CIA identification badge and a worn metal case. Harrison and I worked together for 15 years. He's deputy director now. Asked me to bring these tonight in case anyone had questions about my credentials. I opened the metal case, revealing the Purple Hearts and Medal of Valor. The room gasped. Victoria was gripping the table so hard her knuckles were white. But you said you were... I said exactly what my cover required me to say, I replied calmly. For 30 years, my identity was classified at the highest levels. Even my family knew only what they needed to know for their safety. Danny stared at me. Dad, is this all real? It's real, son. Victoria finally found her voice. For 2 years, you let me think. I let you think what you wanted to think. I let you show everyone exactly who you are when you think you're safe to do it. That's when Margaret Stone approached our table. Colonel Brooks, my company owes its last 3 defense contracts to intelligence you provided. Thank you for your service. Judge Coleman was next. The terrorist trial I presided over in 2019, your investigation made those convictions possible. One by one, people Victoria had wanted to impress began sharing how they knew me. Not as Sam Brooks, building security guard, but as Colonel Brooks, CIA operative. Robert Sterling stepped forward. Colonel, the Pentagon Procurement Office has been trying to reach you for months. There's a consulting position with a 7-figure annual retainer. Victoria watched in horror as the same people who'd known her for years, federal contractors, politicians, business leaders, suddenly looked at me with profound respect. But you work security, she said weakly. You live in that apartment. You drive that old car. I chose that life, I said. After 30 years of classified operations, I wanted normal. I wanted simple. I wanted to sit in a quiet lobby and not wonder if someone was trying to kill me. But the money, you only gave us $20,400 for the wedding, because that's what a security guard could afford. I wasn't ready to explain where the rest came from. Agent Morrison from Treasury appeared at my side. Colonel Brooks, we have your back pay authorization, $2.3 million, as specified in the presidential order. He handed me an official Treasury check. Victoria saw the amount and made a sound like a wounded animal. Additionally, Agent Morrison continued, the Secret Service has been instructed to provide protective detail during your transition back to active consultation status. Victoria stared at him. Secret Service? Ma'am, Colonel Brooks prevented chemical weapons attacks that could have killed tens of thousands of Americans. There are still active threats against him. The full weight of what she'd done was finally hitting Victoria. She'd spent 2 years publicly humiliating someone who dedicated his life to protecting people like her. Wait, she whispered. This can't be real. I pulled out my encrypted phone and dialed a number. It rang once. Brooks. Harrison, it's Sam. I'm at my son's wedding. Victoria here has some questions about my service record. I put the phone on speaker. Agent Harrison White's voice filled the silent ballroom. Good evening, everyone. This is Deputy Director Harrison White, Central Intelligence Agency. I'm calling to confirm that Colonel Samuel Brooks is indeed one of America's most decorated intelligence officers. Victoria was gripping the table, swaying slightly. Colonel Brooks spent 30 years in deep cover operations, Harrison continued via speakerphone. His work prevented the 2001 chemical attack on New York subway systems, the 2008 biological weapons plot in Los Angeles, and 4 other major terrorist operations. The room was completely silent except for Victoria's rapid breathing. He received the Medal of Honor for Operation Sandstorm, where he led a 12-man team into Afghanistan to prevent a chemical weapons attack. Despite severe injuries, he completed the mission and extracted all team members alive. Harrison paused. Colonel Brooks had been living under light cover since retirement, working private security to maintain his operational instincts. Many of our finest operatives choose humble occupations after classified service. I ended the call and looked at Victoria. Any other questions about my background? She was crying now, her designer makeup running down her cheeks. I ruined everything. You revealed everything, I corrected. There's a difference, because the truth was finally out. Not just about my service record, but about what kind of person Victoria really was when she thought she was safe to show it. And 180 of Martha's Vineyard's most influential people had witnessed every second of it. The applause erupted again. People were standing, giving me a sustained ovation. Victoria stood, frozen, watching her entire worldview collapse in real time. The immediate aftermath was devastating for Victoria. Within minutes of the revelation, the social dynamics of the entire reception had shifted. People who'd barely acknowledged me before were now approaching with newfound respect. Colonel Brooks, said William Harrison, owner of Harrison Maritime Industries, I had no idea. My company has benefited from CIA intelligence for years. Thank you for your service. Victoria watched in stunned silence as her own social circle, people she'd grown up with, families she'd known for decades, suddenly treated me like visiting royalty. But the real consequences began when she tried to salvage the situation. Everyone, she announced, attempting to regain control of her own wedding reception. "I think there's been a misunderstanding about my appreciation for Sam's service." The room turned to look at her. Judge Coleman raised an eyebrow. "I've always respected Sam's contributions," Victoria continued, her voice shaking. "Perhaps I didn't express it properly earlier." Congressman Bradley, who'd heard her entire public tirade, stepped forward. "Ms. Hayes Brooks, we all heard your toast. You called a Medal of Honor recipient a liar and demanded he justify his service record at his son's wedding." Victoria's face went crimson. "I was just confused. I didn't understand." "You understood perfectly," said Margaret Stone. "You thought he was beneath your family's status. You made that very clear. But the social circle Victoria had spent years cultivating was now watching her try to backtrack from public statements they'd all witnessed. "I think," said Robert Sterling from Federal Procurement, "we've all learned something important about character tonight." Victoria looked around desperately for support, but found none. Even her own family members were looking uncomfortable. "Sam," she said, turning to me with tears streaming down her face, "please tell them I didn't mean—" I kept my voice calm and measured. "Victoria, everyone heard exactly what you meant. You spent 2 years treating me like hired help because you thought I was poor and powerless. When you discovered otherwise, you immediately tried to change your story. That's not true. You told 180 people I was lying about my identity. You demanded I justify my existence at your wedding reception. You called me pathetic and embarrassing." The room was dead silent. Victoria's wedding dress suddenly looked less like a symbol of celebration and more like a costume she couldn't escape. "But," I continued, "this isn't about punishment. It's about consequences." "What do you mean?" That's when my phone buzzed. I checked the message and looked up at Victoria's father, Richard Hayes. "Mr. Hayes," I said, "you might want to check your company email." Richard pulled out his phone. His face went white as he read. "What is it, Daddy?" Victoria asked. "Hayes Real Estate just lost our federal contracts," he said quietly. "All of them. Effective immediately." Victoria stared at him. "What federal contracts?" $12 million annually in government property management," Richard said. $12 million annually in government property management," Richard said, his voice hollow. "Military housing, federal office leases, VA hospital properties, they're all being reviewed for security considerations." Victoria turned to me. "You did this?" "I didn't do anything," I said calmly. "But federal agencies take security very seriously. When Medal of Honor recipients are publicly humiliated by government contractors, it raises questions about judgment and character." The implications hit Victoria like a physical blow. Her family's business, the foundation of their wealth and social status, was collapsing in real time. "This is inane," she whispered. "You can't destroy our livelihood because I hurt your feelings." "Victoria," said Congressman Bradley, "you didn't hurt his feelings. You attacked a decorated war hero at a public event attended by federal officials and contractors. You questioned his integrity and demanded he justify his service record." Margaret Stone nodded. "My company's board will be asking serious questions about our relationship with Hayes Real Estate after tonight." Victoria looked around the room in growing panic. The same social network she'd used to build her identity was now discussing her family's reputation like it was toxic waste. "But this was just a misunderstanding," she pleaded. "No," I said quietly. "This was you showing everyone who you really are when you think you're safe to do it." Danny finally spoke up. "Victoria, Dad's right. This wasn't a moment of confusion. You've been treating him like this for 2 years. You're taking his side? I'm taking the side of basic human decency." Victoria's last hope that her husband would defend her evaporated. She was completely alone in a room full of people who just watched her reveal her true character. "The check," she said suddenly, staring at the $2.3 million Treasury payment still in my hands. "That money, it's real?" "It's real." "So you're wealthy?" "I'm comfortable." Victoria's mind was reeling. "All this time, you could have contributed more to the wedding. You could have helped Danny with his student loans. I could have enabled your belief that money determines worth. I finished. Instead, I let you show everyone exactly what you value. The final blow came when Victoria's mother, Patricia Hayes, approached our table. Sam, she said formally, on behalf of our family, I apologize for my daughter's behavior. It was inexcusable. Victoria stared at her mother. Mom? Victoria, I'm ashamed. This man has served our country with distinction for 30 years, and you treated him like hired help. But you agreed with me. You said his job was... You said... I said what I thought was expected in polite conversation. I didn't publicly humiliate a war hero at my daughter's wedding. Victoria realized she was truly isolated. Her family, her husband, her social circle, everyone was distancing themselves from her behavior. I can fix this, she said desperately. I can apologize publicly. I can make donations to veteran charities. You can start, I said, by learning that apologies don't erase consequences. Actions have results, Victoria. Tonight, you learned what yours are. The wedding reception continued, but Victoria was no longer its center. People gravitated toward me, sharing stories about military service, asking about my experiences, treating me with the respect Victoria had spent 2 years denying. She sat at the head table, still in her $85,000 dress, watching her perfect wedding become a monument to her own character failure. Sam, she said finally, what happens now? I looked at my daughter-in-law, a woman who'd spent 2 years trying to make me invisible, only to discover she'd been attacking someone who dedicated his life to protecting people like her. Now you decide who you want to be going forward, I said, because everyone in this room, everyone who matters in your world, has seen who you've been. The consequences began immediately and cascaded for weeks. By Monday morning, Hayes Real Estate had lost not just their federal contracts, but 3 major private clients who'd attended the wedding. The Martha's Vineyard social circle was small and interconnected. Victoria's public meltdown had been witnessed by exactly the wrong people. $12.7 million in annual revenue, Richard Hayes told me when he called Tuesday afternoon. Gone. I'm sorry to hear that, Richard. Are you? Because this feels like retaliation. It's not retaliation. It's consequences. Federal agencies don't maintain contracts with companies whose leadership publicly attacks veterans. It's a liability issue. The truth was more complex. I hadn't made any calls or pulled any strings, but when the wedding videos hit social media, and they did within hours, federal procurement offices began reviewing their contractor relationships as a matter of routine security protocol. Victoria's performance had been captured on multiple phones. The video of her demanding I justify my service record while holding a presidential letter was viewed 2.8 million times in the first week. The comments section was brutal. Imagine humiliating a war hero at your own wedding. This woman just destroyed her family's business on live video. Gold digger finds out father-in-law saved America. Victoria tried to control the narrative. She released a statement through her family's public relations firm. I deeply regret my comments at our wedding reception. I was experiencing stress and confusion about information that had been withheld from our family. I have nothing but respect for our military heroes and my father-in-law's service to our country. But the damage was done. The video showed exactly what kind of person Victoria was when she thought she held all the power. Social media wasn't interested in her explanations. The financial consequences multiplied. Hayes Real Estate's remaining clients began canceling contracts, citing reputational concerns. Their Martha's Vineyard properties, marketed to federal officials and defense contractors, became impossible to lease. We're looking at bankruptcy, Patricia Hayes told Maggie during a tense phone call I overheard. Victoria's outburst has destroyed 40 years of business relationships. But the social consequences were even more devastating. Martha's Vineyard Society operates on reputation and relationships. Victoria had spent her entire life building status within that community. In one evening, she'd burned it all down. The yacht club quietly suggested the Hayes family take some time away from social events. Charity boards began declining Victoria's volunteer applications. Former friends stopped returning her calls. It's like we have the plague, Victoria told Danny during one of their increasingly frequent arguments. People crossed the street to avoid talking to me. Danny was struggling too. His coworkers had seen the video. His boss, a Navy veteran, called him into the office for a conversation about family values. I'm not responsible for my wife's behavior, Danny told him. No, but you're married to someone who publicly attacked a Medal of Honor recipient. That raises questions about judgment. Danny came home that night looking exhausted. Victoria, we need to talk. I wasn't there for that conversation, but Maggie filled me in later. Danny had given Victoria an ultimatum. Get counseling and genuinely change, or the marriage was over. She's blaming everyone except herself, Maggie told me. She says you orchestrated everything to humiliate her. What did Danny say? He said that's exactly the kind of thinking that got her into this mess. Meanwhile, my own life was changing in unexpected ways. Agent Harrison called 3 days after the wedding. Sam, the Pentagon consulting position is real. 7 figures annually. They want your expertise on emerging threats. I'm retired, Harrison. You were in hiding. There's a difference. The $2.3 million back pay had cleared into my account. 30 years of hazard pay, investment returns, and classified bonuses I'd never been able to access. I was wealthy by any measure, but wealth meant something different when you'd earned it preventing terrorist attacks. The breaking point came 3 weeks after the wedding. Victoria showed up at my apartment unannounced. I need to talk to you, she said when I opened the door. She looked terrible. Designer clothes, but exhausted eyes and shaking hands. Come in. Victoria sat on my modest couch and stared at the presidential letter, which Maggie had framed and hung on our living room wall next to my Purple Hearts. I Googled Operation Sandstorm, she said quietly. I waited. 47 terrorists. Chemical weapons that could have killed thousands. You went in with 12 men and came out with 11. Johnson didn't make it. You carried him 2 miles through enemy territory. I nodded. Victoria started crying. While you were saving lives, I was buying purses and complaining about restaurant service. Different people, different lives. No, she said firmly. Different character. I spent 2 years treating a hero like he was beneath me because I'm shallow and cruel and stupid. It was the first honest thing I'd heard her say. Victoria, what do you want from me? I want to know how to fix this. My marriage is falling apart. My family's business is destroyed. Nobody will talk to us, and it's all my fault. You can't fix the business consequences. Federal agencies don't forgive security lapses. You can't fix the social consequences. Martha's Vineyard Society has long memories. Then what can I fix? You can fix yourself. You can figure out why you think money and status makes someone valuable. You can learn to treat people with respect, regardless of their job title. Victoria nodded, wiping her eyes. Danny wants me to go to therapy. That's a good start. Will you ask Agent Harrison to reconsider the contracts? I looked at her for a long moment. Victoria, this isn't about Harrison. This is about a dozen federal agencies independently deciding they don't want to work with companies whose leadership attacks veterans. That's not something I can fix, even if I wanted to. But you could try. No, I couldn't. And more importantly, I won't. Her face fell. Because, I continued, that would teach you that consequences can be negotiated away if you know the right people. That's exactly the kind of thinking that got you here. Victoria sat in silence for several minutes. I'm going to lose everything, aren't I? You're going to lose everything you built on a foundation of judging others by their wealth and status. What you do next determines what you build to replace it. She stood up to leave. Sam, do you think Danny will ever forgive me? I think Danny will forgive you when you become someone worth forgiving. How long will that take? However long it takes you to mean it. After she left, Maggie asked me if I felt sorry for her. I feel sorry for who she could have been, I said, but not for the consequences of who she chose to be. 6 months later, things had settled into a new normal. Victoria had started therapy, as Danny insisted. Real therapy, not the kind designed to help her feel better about herself, but the kind that forced her to examine why she'd built her identity around looking down on others. She's working on it, Danny told me during one of our monthly dinners. Some days are better than others. Hayes Real Estate had filed for bankruptcy in November. Richard and Patricia Hayes had to sell their Martha's Vineyard estate and move to a modest condo in Hyannis. The social fall was complete, but Patricia seemed almost relieved. I spent 40 years worrying about what other people thought, she told Maggie. It's exhausting. Maybe this is a chance to figure out who we really are. Victoria had gotten a job. Not the kind of job Hayes real estate heiresses usually took. She was working at a nonprofit veterans organization in Boston, helping process disability claims for $18 an hour. It's humbling, she admitted when she called to update me on her progress. These men and women sacrificed everything for strangers, and I spent years complaining about thread counts on bedsheets. The work was changing her, slowly. She was learning about real service, real sacrifice, real character. She was also learning that a paycheck doesn't determine someone's worth. There's a veteran here who lost both legs in Afghanistan, she told me during one call. He makes minimum wage processing paperwork, and he's the most dignified person I've ever met. He's teaching me what honor actually looks like. Danny was proud of her efforts, but cautious about the future. She's changing, he said, but I need to see if it sticks when things get easier. The marriage was surviving, but it was different. Danny had established new boundaries. No comments about other people's jobs or income. No judgments based on social status. No tolerance for the kind of behavior that had destroyed her family's reputation. I love her, he told me, but I won't live with someone who thinks being wealthy makes them better than other people. Victoria was learning to live with consequences that couldn't be negotiated away. The Martha's Vineyard social circle had closed ranks against her permanently. Federal agencies had blacklisted her family's business. The internet never forgot her wedding meltdown. But she was also learning something else, that rock bottom could be a foundation for building something better. I want to apologize, she said during Christmas dinner at our apartment. Not because I think it will fix anything, but because you deserve to hear it. Okay. I spent 2 years treating you terribly because I thought your job made you less important than my family. I was wrong about your job, but more importantly, I was wrong about what makes someone important. She looked around our modest living room, the presidential letter on the wall, Maggie's nursing school graduation photo, Danny's childhood pictures, my purple hearts in their simple frames. This is what matters, she said. Family, service, character, not the size of your house or the price of your car. Do you believe that, or do you just think you should believe it? Victoria considered the question carefully. I'm learning to believe it. Some days I have to remind myself, but I'm trying. That was honest, and honesty was progress. Victoria, you don't need my forgiveness. You need to forgive yourself for wasting years of your life on things that don't matter. How do I do that? By building something better going forward. By treating people with respect, regardless of their bank account. By raising kids who understand that service matters more than status. She nodded. Danny and I have been talking about kids. What have you decided? That any child we raise will know their grandfather is a hero, and they'll know that heroes come in all kinds of uniforms. After dinner, as we cleaned dishes, Victoria asked me one final question. Sam, do you think people can really change? I thought about my own life. 30 years in the shadows, then 3 years choosing to be invisible in a different way. People make choices every day about who they want to be. I think people can choose to change, I said. The question is whether they want to badly enough to do the work. I want to. Then you will. As they left that night, Danny hugged me goodbye. Thanks, Dad. For everything. For what? For showing me what integrity looks like. For teaching Victoria what character means. For proving that quiet strength is stronger than loud wealth. After they drove away, Maggie and I sat on our couch, looking at the presidential letter on our wall. Any regrets? She asked. About which part? About staying quiet for so long. About letting her treat you that way. I thought about it. No regrets. She needed to show everyone who she really was. Now she has the chance to become someone better. And if she doesn't, then Danny knows what he's dealing with, and he can make informed decisions about his future. because sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the rope to either climb out of their hole or hang themselves with their own choices. Victoria was learning to climb. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family members who didn't respect your worth? Share your story below.